Hello, everyone. Welcome to Uncanny Treks. This is a very special episode. It is our third episode on the Jonathan Hickman Illuminati book. That is New Avengers. We're talking about the original New Avengers Volume 3 trade, Other Worlds. That covers issues 13 through 17 of New Avengers. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. Matt, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Bob. These issues of New Avengers are a whole lot easier to follow than Adjectival's Avengers, in my opinion.
Just because of the much compressed cast and the much clearer plot.
Well, and then the fact that two of the issues we're going to cover today are just them watching a view screen to see what's
That
going
is
down.
true. Basically, Black Panther and Namor broing out and watching a movie together and providing a riff track.
That's exactly. I'm good with. I need that after such a huge event with Infinity.
We've got two different artists on this bunch of issues. I'll talk about the second artist when we get to his issues, but through issues 13 through 15, we've got Simone Bianchi on the art. And I will praise a couple things Bianchi does. I don't think he's a bad artist, but I will just say Bianchi in general, not really to my taste as an artist. He also works more as a cover artist than an interior artist, so that might have something to do with it. I was looking at his bibliography, and I think the only thing I've really read from him that's interior work is he did Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers Shining Knight miniseries way back when.
I've never heard of that.
You've heard of the Seven Soldiers series, though, right?
No.
I don't know that you would like it.
Okay.
An event Grant Morrison did in maybe like 2007-ish, maybe 2005-ish, somewhere around there. Basically a modern version of the Seven Soldiers, that old Golden Age team that had like the Shining Knight. And
Oh, those guys. Yeah.
he used some of those characters, but he also had some new characters on there, Zatanna and Mr. Miracle. And it was a complicated story. There was an opening issue and a closing issue, but then there were 7 miniseries, I think usually 4 issues each. And the 7 miniseries all were solo stories focused on one of the 7 soldiers.
Apparently put an omnibus out not too long ago. This came out in 2005, 2006.
It was billed as, I think, a maxi event or a maxi series. I ultimately was not in love with it, but it was an interesting storytelling experiment for sure.
30 issues total.
Simone Bianchi was the artist for one of those miniseries for Shining Knight, and he also draws number 13, Inhumanity, which is a tie-in to the crossover Inhumanity, which we already talked about a little in prior episodes, right? Because Infinity basically leads into Inhumanity. But on the other hand, thankfully, this isn't directly tied to Inhumanity at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You got Black Bolt on the cover, and you call it Inhumanity. Then here's a summary, Bob. The Illuminati investigate how other worlds deal with incursion events by using a newly built bridge.
You get an alternate universe version of Inhumanity that's told briefly over 2 pages.
That is one thing. They do condense these other worlds, which I appreciate, because you can't go too far into this in one issue. You do see that they're building the bridge, which they call a mirror, that the Black Swan refers to as a mirror, and she's the one that gives them the idea and helps them, moves them into this direction of creating this machine.
But then Reed reveals that he's already invented, much to Tony's consternation, and he reveals that it's the bridge that we're familiar with from Hickman's early Fantastic Four run.
Which I thought was awesome, because that means we're moving into that territory.
So your favorite panel was the reveal of the bridge.
Yes, that reveal of the bridge. Oh, that's where they were going with this.
That's funny. My guess for your favorite panel would have been the splash page on page 6. This week you've already picked another splash page in a different comic where we have a team reveal. But this sets up a motif that most of these issues will do. And actually most of these issues will do on page 6, which is funny. But here we have our alternate Illuminati. And so this version of the Illuminati is Mr. Fantastic, both Black Panthers. It's T'Challa and Shuri. Then it's Black Bolt, it's Iron Man, it's everybody's favorite couple, Professor X and Magneto. And then it's Captain Marvel, not Carol Danvers, but the Kree Marvel.
Right. This is Earth 23099.
It's really, really obvious in hindsight, but I think the 2 times I read this comic before were both before Doctor Strange 2. And so it's very interesting to get to this and be, oh, this is completely what they were drawing on for Doctor Strange 2, the movie. Now, granted, obviously, I vaguely remembered that they got into alternate Illuminatis. I didn't remember them getting this deep into alternate Illuminatis.
They go full-blown alternate Illuminatis. This is straight where they copied this from, Bob. I didn't even realize this was a thing until this
Yeah,
issue.
sure.
It makes perfect sense now. But as we go through these books, you will see several other Illuminati teams, and it's in the exact same style in each issue, which I thought was cool.
Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, saying this exact same thing in each
Correct.
group, right?
Very creative.
That's very cool. So my favorite actual panel from this issue, Matt, as opposed to my guess at your favorite panel, is page 14, and it's a double-page splash of Doctor Strange. And even though I'm not a big fan of Bianchi, I do have to give it to him. Bianchi does draw really interesting versions of Doctor Strange, and so that's cool. And that also sets us up to transition into the next issue, issue number 14, the Agamotto Gambit. And I just want to go ahead and say my favorite panel of that issue is actually the cover, where you get Bianchi doing a six-armed levitating Doctor Strange.
This issue was super Doctor Strange heavy. And basically, in Agamotto Gambit, Doctor Strange sells his entire soul to have the power to tear planets from the heavens and place them in a new sky. So he's come up with his own solution to the incursion problem. We knew from Infinity that at the end of Infinity that he was planning on going into the Black Bible or something.
I believe it's entitled, and I know this because there was a 90s series entitled this, Pages from the Dark Hold, the Books of Sin.
Anyway, he's up in there, he's caught, and he's trying to figure out what he can do.
And it's funny because one demon's, how much of your soul are you willing to sell? And he's the whole thing.
He's going to sell the entire thing. He's not just going to get part of it. And what I found interesting too is the amount of power you're given is equal to the percentage of your soul you give up. So you can just give up 1% street magic tricks.
It does raise a question of like, can you still get into heaven as long as you got 51% of your soul?
How does that work too?
Maybe 50% and the weight of a feather? Is that all you need to get into?
That's a real question here, and we need to get that figured out, because you give up some of your soul. Does that just mean you're missing pieces? You're pixelated when you get up there?
Heaven is cool, but it's not as cool as it might have been.
It could have been cooler, man, had you not sold that 1% of your soul. You're missing that one little pixel in your face. Everybody's going to point it out.
Maybe you either have to, depending on your version of heaven, you either have to wear more clothes or less clothes.
There you go.
My guess at your favorite panel in issue number 14 was also page number 6, and it was the reveal of our second alternate Illuminati, which here is Mr. Fantastic, Iron Man, T'Challa, Yellow Jacket, the evil version of Hank Pym, Doctor Doom, Emma Frost, and two versions of Captain Britain, both Betsy Braddock and her brother Brian Braddock.
And you would be absolutely correct, Bob. That is my favorite panel.
What made you like this Illuminati so much more than the first panel?
I really liked that Emma Frost is on it. I don't know what it is about that. And then we had both Captain Britons, which I thought was cool. You never see Captain Britain in this kind of position, at least in my reading. Emma Frost sitting across the table from Dr. Doom. You're going to get done. That's all I'm saying.
That's an executive Illuminati right there.
I don't care about Yellow Jacket. He was stupid in the Ant-Man movie. I've never even read a comic where he's been...
I know there's more complexity here that I'm oversimplifying, but I think in general, Yellow Jacket is just the more aggressive, more evil identity that Hank Pym sometimes takes on.
Oh.
In the movie, they spun it out as,
He's
Yellow Jacket is Damian Cross, I think.
Somebody, yeah.
Played by like Corey Stoll, if I remember correctly.
Damian Cross is a wrestler, but I may be wrong.
I think he might both be a wrestler and a antagonist, but maybe I'm totally wrong about that.
I do find interesting though is that Iron Man has been on every single team.
The two constants are Reed Richards and Iron Man, it would seem, which really does play up their responsibility. And it is interesting that in this universe, the implication is that Emma Frost has supplanted Professor X, Magneto, and Beast as the representative of the mutants. It also does imply that in this version of reality, Doctor Doom and Mr. Fantastic are bros, because we have a very cool page on 18 of this version of Doom having to cradle this version of Mr. Fantastic's corpse. So that's interesting.
If you look in the panel directly below it, his eyes are closed. I couldn't tell if those are tears or part of his armor.
It's a little hard to say.
They did that on purpose.
But the other thing to say about this version of the alternate Illuminati is it really is foreshadowing Hickman's run, interestingly. Emma Frost being on a council is obviously very important to the X-Men comics in the Hickman era and then the post-Hickman era when Kieran Gillen is writing Immortal X-Men. And this may be the first time. It also might not be, because I don't know these characters super well either. But this may actually be the first time we see both Betsy and her brother as Captain Britain. I think in normal Marvel continuity at this point, Brian is Captain Britain and Betsy is just Psylocke. Which in the Krakoa era, when Hickman is the editor and writer of the main X-Men book, you have an Excalibur book where, if I'm remembering correctly, in that Excalibur book, Brian has retired as Captain Britain, and Betsy Braddock is Captain Britain. And then they brought back the original woman that Psylocke's body belonged to, Quanon, and Quanon is working as Psylocke. Betsy Braddock, who we knew as Psylocke when we were kids, in somebody else's body, is now Captain Britain.
Very simple to follow, guys. Not hard at all to understand.
There's also a little X-Men teasers in this issue. They referenced the fourth age of Apocalypse and Phoenix Egg. Yeah. Hickman tipping his hand to X-Men mythos he would somewhat explore in the X-Men run later.
He was already cooking.
I've said on before, my impression is that Hickman was always just an X-Men fan and had to get into Fantastic Four and Avengers in order to write them, but was not a pre-existing fan of either team. Issue number 15, See How Swans Fly. What goes down there, man?
Discovering that the bridge can also see through time, the Avengers review Black Swan's activity on other worlds. And then Thanos is slowly returning from Thane's death freeze.
My favorite panel in this issue is on page 6, where Beast says it's hard to say what's worse, how grimly all these universes end, or the shockingly repetitive nature of what we're learning from watching it. I thought that was a good moment.
Yeah, my favorite panel was on...
Can I give my guess was on page 15, where we see Simone Bianchi draw a reaction shot of Beast, Black Bolt, Black Panther, and Mr. Fantastic, which for whatever reason, I looked at those four guys doing a double take, and I thought of you, Matt.
My actual favorite panel, Bob, is on page 19. We have a random Human Torch appearance, but apparently it's Mr. Fantastic with Torch powers.
That was my impression.
There were 12 issues this week, Bob, for this podcast. This was the only time I was so confused. Why is Human Torch showing up here?
Well, except for that one time you thought Golden Age Human Torch was Starbrand.
But I was not supposed to read that. So
so that
was mental. That was unnecessary mental fatigue or something.
Well,
I don't know.
I bring it up not just to flex on you,
but just that I don't really know who the Human Torch is.
It seems the common denominator here is the Human Torch. That seems to be the common denominator of your problem.
I just don't understand the Human Torch, Bob. That's my problem.
Yeah, man, from looking at the preceding pages, it's just Tony Stark and Reed Richards talking to Black Swan. And when the guy doing the flame on is Reed, he's got the beard. It's Reed. I don't know if you remember, but that was something that came up a fair bit in the alternate versions of Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four run, is you'd see versions where Reed Richards had some or all of the powers of the other members of the family.
Somebody had taken on their powers so they would not have to have that. I think so.
It was like he sacrificed himself, but sometimes it was a little bit more sinister implication. Maybe he killed them and harvested their powers.
It's freaky and fantastic.
I don't know if we have enough to know here, what the case is with this version of Reed having the Human Torch powers.
If you ever need to confuse me, just disguise yourself as the Human Torch.
Apparently all blonde white men.
Yeah.
That's the difference between Jim Hammond and whatever Starbrand's name is that I don't actually know.
Yeah, it's
well,
true.
Matt, the first 3 issues are a 3-part arc, and then we're going to move to a 2-part arc that's called Perfect World in issues 16 and 17. And the 3-part arc was drawn by Simone Bianchi. These 2-part issues are drawn by Rags Morales. Do you remember his art from Grant Morrison's run on Action Comics, or Jeff Johns' run on Hawkman, or I guess in a darker vein, Brad Meltzer's Identity Crisis miniseries?
Yeah.
I like Rags Morales, despite the fact that he illustrated one of the worst comics ever printed, Identity Crisis. I did mostly associate him with DC in my mind, but I didn't realize until I looked him up, these 2 issues are basically the only interior comics he's ever drawn for Marvel. He's done some other covers for Marvel, but this is basically the only 2 issues from Marvel.
Oh, wow.
Which is very appropriate when we get to the subject matter.
Yeah, because Bob, the summary of this issue, Perfect World, how would the Justice League handle an incursion event?
Yeah. The two things I wanted to flag as my potential favorites from this issue, Matt. One is a very minor detail, and it's throughout the issue, but I just focused on page 7, because as we alluded to earlier, basically both these issues are just Black Panther and Namor watching Zack Snyder's Justice League.
That's a good way to put it.
And Rags Morales draws Namor with really, really long ears, and I thought that was cool. I was deeply amused by that. And then the other thing I was amused by is this is definitely the Justice League, but there's some influence of the Justice Society. The name of the alternate Justice League is the Great Society, which is also an amusing play on this Great Society. But there's also a little bit of the authority to this Justice League too, and that's especially true with, I'm not sure if you got this, but I get a strong homoeroticism between this version of Batman and Superman. Stronger than you usually get with Batman and Superman, although admittedly not as strong as the outright relationship you get between Apollo and Midnighter and the Authority.
The way their costume designs remind me too of the Authority. And I'm going to run down the characters real quick. You've got the writer, who is the Batman. He looks like a knight, literally.
And people want to look at it. This is on page 17. We have them all assembled in a meeting.
And just so, in case you're wondering what world this is, it's Earth 4,290,001. All right.
I like that N1.
You've got the Jovian, who is the Martian Manhunter. He's a green dude. Looks just like the Martian Manhunter. You've got the Norn, who is Dr. Fate and literally has Dr. Fate's mask. It's just silver.
It is interesting to say that the Norn stones are a thing from Norse mythology and are pretty important in Thor comics, at least in some periods. And so it is a little interesting that Dr. Fate, who has his roots more in Sumerian and Egyptian mythology, is done with a little bit of Norse influence here too.
And you've got Sun God, who's Superman. He's looks like Superman. He's just got a yellow outfit. He's got a cape and everything. You got Boundless, who I believe is supposed to be a combination of Wonder Woman and Flash.
Oh, that's interesting. I took her as just being the Flash, but now that you say that, there isn't really a Wonder Woman analog, which is the obvious thing we're missing. So
Right.
I didn't think about that. The other thing I would just say quickly is in the early 90s, Legion of Superheroes, the reboot post-Zero Hour Legion of Superheroes, they introduce a new character who's a black lady speedster named XS, the letters X and S. There's a little bit, I think, of XS influence here, but yeah, she's definitely the Flash analog. But like you say, especially with that name Boundless, a bit of a Wonder Woman analog too.
Right. And then you have Dr. Spectrum, who you're going to have to help me on that.
Green Lantern. Not totally sure about this, but we talked about Squadron Supreme, where Hyperion, that's a different Marvel Justice League game. And Dr. Spectrum is the Green Lantern analog on Squadron Supreme. I don't think any of these other characters are Squadron Supreme characters, but I could be wrong about that. But Dr. Spectrum definitely is.
Okay.
Where in a way we're dealing with a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
They're all sitting at a table just like they would in the Hall of Justice. They're on, it's not the Watchtower, it's just the tower.
My guesses for your favorite panels were in the prior issues, we saw all these alternate Illuminatis and we saw Reed Richards give the famous speech of everything dies, I accept this. But on page 16 and 17, which is also different pages, we see this with the Justice League instead of with the Illuminati, and we see Superman or Sun God in the Reed Richards position. And his position, which is a very nice philosophical distinction from Reed Richards, is that everything lives. So my pick for your favorite panel would have been, I thought you might go with everything lives with Sun God or Superman saying that, or you might go with the page where we see them all sitting at the table, page 7.
You find me so optimistic, Bob, but no, that's not the case. My favorite was on page 13. And
we're calling him Wayne. It's his first name. Man, treading close to the line with that one, aren't you?
Yeah, they literally call him Wayne. He's out there and he is planting roses for all the people that have died. He wasn't able to save them. And he's planting roses in a design. Whereas if you think of the Bruce Wayne in DC Comics, he goes and he lays roses down for parents.
This is fun because it's a much less narcissistic version.
He's making things more beautiful.
Yeah. To move into the part 2, Perfect World part 2 and 17, but I want us to hold off on the summary because that a little bit spoils the reveal at the end, which I really like.
All right.
So I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite panel in issue number 17, Perfect World part 2?
Well, for issue 17, Bob, my favorite panel was the flashback page at the beginning because it's designed in a way that looks like an old school comic book. It has the Great Society at the top and previously in the Great Society, and it's got the heroes from this, but they're drawn in a way that makes it look like they're from an older 70s comic. It's got this aesthetic to it.
The Great Society logo is very much the classic Justice League of America logo.
The typeface is different.
It's also very cool because I don't know how much you noticed this, and I didn't pay super attention to it, but the flashback or the recap pages in these issues were all very similar, right? And they all had a lot of the same panels establishing the Illuminati. And so it's very cool to see a different flashback page as if this is a Great Society comic and not an Illuminati comic. A very neat storytelling device.
That was definitely my favorite panel, even though it's just the beginning of the issue.
My favorite panel was page 13, and this is where this version of Superman, Sun God, asks this version of Batman, who you said his name is the Rider. They've just defeated one incursion event. Their Dr. Fate, their Norn, has defeated it at great cost. And another one immediately starts happening. And so this version of Superman, everybody else is despairing. And this version of Superman basically tells this version of Batman to buck up. And he's like, "Are you not willing to die for your world? Because I am." I thought that was a great moment. Superman optimist, Batman pessimist. Very cool.
Going back to Namor and Black Panther's discussions and talking back and forth, part of this is that they're watching the other incursion events to see if there's other ways they can stop them from happening.
That comment about Beast I made like in a much earlier issue, right? How they're all repetitive. On the one hand, almost seems to be Beast mimicking maybe some reader complaints in the comic, but is also puts the Illuminati, our Illuminati, in the position of the reader, of the observer, and they're like, oh, all of these seem to end the same, right?
What's so fascinating too about the whole idea of the bridge itself, being able to see the past and somewhat into the future. You can only see a couple of hours into the future.
My guess at your favorite panel from this last issue 17 was also would have been a Namor Panther scene. There's a scene because it's Namor and Panther, even though they still hate each other and they're still going to kill each other one day, are starting to remember why they used to like each other.
Yeah.
And Namor tells Panther that one glorious lie is worth 100 petty truths, and all Black Panther can do is drink whatever Atlantean brandy that Namor has brought with him.
They both sip on it and have a good laugh. But as they're laughing, Bob, what do they realize?
They realize, Matt, which we have, I think one of the best reveals I've ever seen in comics is that they're looking 2 hours into the future. And in this Justice League of America story, our Illuminati, the 616 Illuminati, are going to show up as the villains.
Yes. It's going to be awesome.
And they all do. Rags Morales does a very good draw. He doesn't have to do much because the designs are already there. But man, our Illuminati look straight up supervillains.
They look evil, especially the Hulk, man. He looks like, what's the Abomination? He looks more like Abomination here.
Nice. I was texting a couple of my other friends after I reread this, Matt, and I was just like, man, I forgot how good Hickman is with these cliffhangers.
Yes.
Sometimes.
I can't wait for that.
Listeners, in about a week, we aim to go ahead and record on the Adjectiveless Avengers Volume 6, and we'll record on the next volume of Hickman's Illuminati, his New Avengers Volume 4. And before we break, I did just want to ask, Matt, at this point, how would you rank the 3 volumes of New Avengers?
Okay, for listeners and my own sanity, let's just talk about Volume 1 focused on...
Was setting up the conditions of the Game of Worlds. It was called Everything Dies, and it was laying out the basic premise.
Of the incursions.
Volume 2 was the Infinity tie-in. There was incursion stuff going on as well, but they were mostly dealing with Thanos' search for Thane among the Inhumans and the consequences of Black Bolt releasing the Terrigen Mist. Where it's going more multiversal, even though the first one went a little multiversal too.
Right. I probably enjoyed the Thanos stuff more so at this point, but just because it was so earth-shattering.
That's interesting.
But I did like the world building of the first New Avengers.
You think you'd go Volume 2, Volume 1, Volume 3?
At this point, yeah. I'm not saying this is a bad comic. It's just once you come off the Infinity piece where you had so many life-threatening, world or universe-threatening things going on, to shift to something different, it's hard to shift. We're back in the section where we're having to build something up to something big, which is what they did. We have a cliffhanger at the end, and it's going to be epic.
In a weird way, I think maybe I like the building more than the climaxes, because I think I would rank them Volume 1, Everything Dies, Volume 3, Other Worlds, then Volume 2, Infinity. The original premise and the place setting for the original premise in Volume 1 is just so tight, so great. That I'd put that at number 1. And I do think Infinity is good, and we talked about this when we covered Infinity. I do think that the New Avengers issues do a pretty good job of standing separate from the rest of the crossover. They don't totally do it though. And for that reason, it to me feels the weakest of the 3, even though in terms of art and in terms of events, a lot of times the art and the events are stronger in Volume 2 than in Volume 3, but ultimately they're so dependent on the Infinity event and the Inhumanity event that I would somewhat set Volume 2 apart. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, yeah.
And I find the alternate Illuminati stuff and the alternate Justice League stuff in this issue very clever, even though neither Bianchi nor Rags Morales are my favorite. They're probably my 2 least favorite artists so far on the run. Not that they're bad, but just they're not my favorites. I would put Volume 3 in the middle, I think.
I could see that.
Cool.
All right, Bob, so what's next?
Avengers Volume 6. and New Avengers Volume 4. We will do that next week. And I guess one last question, Matt. Do you still prefer this comic to adjectiveless Avengers at this point?
At this point, I feel like this is somewhat easier to follow, maybe.
Which is wild, given the
Yeah,
complexity.
it's a strange feeling. I don't know how to explain it unless you've read it. It seems this is more cohesive to some degree, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I like both. I don't have a problem with either.
It's just so hard because the cast on the adjectiveless Avengers is so immense. Even though Hickman does try to give people spotlights as much as he can and to rotate the focus, it's such a huge cast where the more restricted Illuminati cast is easier to deal with. And I don't think you have anything as meaningful as the Namor Black Panther stuff or the Reed Black Swan stuff or even the Superman Batman stuff. These issues.
So would you say that New Adventures is meant to be more of a character-driven book, whereas Agilable Avengers is meant to be the team type of book? Because I'm thinking back to X-Men.
That's fair to say.
Because I'm thinking of all the X-Men I've read. When you're reading X-Men, you're going to have some character beats, character points, but you're not going to go too in depth with some of it, unless it's specific characters that are really involved with the arc. You're going to have the whole team mechanic, and especially when you look at the universal type stuff, the big intergalactic things that happen at X-Men and when they leave and go into space. There's so many characters, so much stuff. That is what Agilable Avengers feels like to me. Whereas New Avengers feels more like the X-Force stuff. Where I was able to, even though that is meant to be a team book, you're so focused on one character or one or two or three characters in the book, not an entire team of mutants or heroes.
I keep forgetting this, and you keep making the comparison, and it's a really good comparison. It's a good reminder to me of how much Hickman's New Avengers does feel like his answer to Remender's Uncanny X-Force, because not only is it a more restricted cast, but it's a really dark version of a more restricted cast operating in secret and making highly morally dubious decisions.
Correct, yes. Not as violent, though.
Not as violent. But I'm glad you keep bringing us back to that, because you're absolutely right.
All right, Bob. So looking forward to next week.
All right, Matt. So Infinite Avengers, Avengers Volume 6, issues number 29 through 34, and New Avengers Volume 4, Perfect World, New Avengers issues 18 through 23. That's what we're doing for next week.
You'll have to remind me of that on Wednesday.
All right, listeners, this has been Uncanny Treks. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks for listening.